Hey y'all, today in this video we're going to be going ahead and talking about another GRE question that is comparative. So they're wanting us to compare this the statement y squared plus 5, and we want to see is that less than or equal to 50. So with our given statement for what we know is that from what we obtain, because this is usually our question right above here. This is usually what they want us to show is true, like which is true. So then we'll go ahead and look at it. So we have 3 less than the absolute value of y less than 7. So we're going to be looking at here the absolute value. So one thing that I took from this as I worked this problem out, as I started to look at it to like deep, deep, dig deeper into this problem was, okay, so if we're looking at the absolute value of this certain number, because it has to stay in between here. So I could be using maybe some negative representations or some positive, but knowing that it's got to stay in between 3 and 7. So the outcome may be that I may have some negative numbers, but they will come out in here. So if I go ahead and listen in a number line, you don't have to do all this, but it's just a way of like interpreting like what's been given. So I visually mapped out a number line. So here's my number line, and I said, okay, here's 0, here's 3, and then I'm gonna say like over here 7. So we know that something in between here may work or has to work because of the given statement. So given that these numbers should work, well, the negative numbers should work also. So this may not be helpful, but this may just be leading us to like a better understanding of the problems that we're dealing with. So knowing that the numbers have to be in between 3 and 7, I focus my intentions on 3 to 7. So I kind of limited down to what numbers can be in between here. So I'm looking now at my number line between 3 and 7. And mind you, I did this kind of like all in my head as I'm doing this. So I know that the absolute value just tells me that it has to be positive. So I'm staying in between the positive realm and I'm staying between 3 and 7. So then I can start thinking about, okay, what numbers would work? Remember, this is more of like a plug and chug type problem. We got to understand when will this occur? What will happen? Maybe some counter differences. So I got to try some numbers out. So I'm going to try some basic numbers out. So I'm going to go with like 4, 5, and 6 because those are the numbers that lie in between them. So if I try 4, if I look at 4 to see what's going to happen, so if I try 4 here, we'll see that that's 16 plus 5, so it should be 21. So if I am correct, which I hope so. Yes, so then the next one number we'll look at is, okay, so this one we could say is less than. So that may be giving you the intuition like, hey, this may be that this number or column A is less than column B. So then we may have a statement that looks like this right now. So then let me try some other numbers. 5 squared plus 6, so we'll say that's 25 plus 5. Sorry, not 6. So we'll say 25 plus 5, which we know that would give me 30. Well then, hey, we're starting to get some repeating situations where, hey, this is turning out to be good. So 4, 5, and 6 are starting to lead us to believe in the same thing. What about 6 now? Because as you get bigger, my y squared gets bigger. And that's the biggest indicator right now is what's going to happen with this 6 squared? What's going to happen with something being squared? Because in previous videos, I've mentioned that if I work with quadratics, they're going to be doubling. Or they'll make my negatives into positives. So be wary about that as you work through these numbers. So then we see here that's 30, that'd be 35. Okay. So then for the most part, we see, okay, this is overall checking out to be the same thing. We're seeing that right now, A is going to be less than B. But then now, because it's telling me any number, it's not telling me integers, because integers are something specific. I'm going to start going into decimals, which we would consider like rational numbers. You can even get irrational numbers in there. So these numbers will let us know, like, okay, for sure, without a doubt, will they check out? I was just checking the whole numbers because those are the easiest. So now I'm going to want to check like 6.9, 6.8. I want to get it as close as possible as to 7 to check those numbers. Because if the biggest numbers will work, then the smallest numbers have to work. So what I'm going to do is check 6.9. So I want to see what 6.9 turns out to be. And you want to add your 5 at the end of it. Oh, okay, so we get 47.61. Well, darn, that's pretty close. Plus 5. we get 52.61. So here's where our situation breaks. This is a counterexample. Remember, I've said it before in previous videos. Counterexamples are what we're looking for in order to help show something is not consistent enough. So that's a lot of the thing we're going to be talking about in these like comparative. Is it consistent throughout the whole problem? So as you notice, I found one counterexample. Now what happens if I work backwards? How many of these would work? Well, I could try 6.7 squared plus 5. Maybe that might give us a better indication of when does this occur. So then we had noticed that 6.5 plus 5 gives me 49.98. So then we start to notice if I start going to 6.75, 6.76, we start being more picky about our digits. We start to realize, hey, there's certain numbers that will break our idea. So this statement, we would have to say it is not, the relationship cannot be determined, because the fact is I found a counterexample to the original statement, that if these numbers lied in between this, one of these things would have to occur. Well, we noticed overall that our intuition was telling us that A would be less than B. Now, I know you're going to go by this fast and kind of work through this, but I would like you all to try some numbers, kind of work through the problem a little bit more. Remember, if you're doing an hour and a half with, I believe there's like at max 50 questions, or maybe like, I don't think there's exceedingly more than 100 questions on the GREs. So if you take your time and kind of space out your questions, you should be able to work these out thoroughly enough to say like, hey, I can create pictures, I can create diagrams for myself. So as you can see, this one needed a little bit more work. So you can see in this one that like there's no relationship to it. So that would be the final answer. If you have any more questions or concerns, please comment or send us an email. We'll try to help you as best as we can.